simply, we take charge. We draw the line in the sand. This is the line. That place is not going to get paved over. I'd like to start the evening by just reciting a couple of quotes from it. If we pollute the last clear air and dirty land and last clean streams and push our paved roads through the last of the silence, we will simply need that wild country available to us, even if we never do more than drive to its edge and look in. Wallace Stinger from Wild Idea. And the other quote I wanted to make is simple, but it's one I want you to really hold tonight and think about. The idea of wilderness needs no defense. It only needs more defenders. Blue Mountain, Birch Cove Lake. So first of all, where is it? Most of you know, I would think, but there's the Bedford Basin, if you can orient yourself, and there is the Birch Cove Lakes. That land assembly that you see there, mostly the green. I think this is a laser pointer, isn't it? Can I point at this? Yeah, so it's on. Anyway, the big strip on the other side of the 103, the green area, the lakes, and somebody's got another laser pointer. That's great, and going all the way up to Cox Lake, way up in the upper, left-hand corner. That is supposed to be our regional park. What a lot of people don't know is that this place has been studied and studied and studied again. It's been studied to death, in fact, and each and every time it's been identified as a critically important natural area that should be protected and preserved. This is from the old MAP-C, Metropolitan Area Planning Commission of 1971. And if you look at the lowermost circled and slightly green area, that's the Birch Cove Lakes, precisely where the developers want to put their massive sprawling development. And by the way, speaking of developers, can we just acknowledge the developers or their staff members, if they could, to show up, stand up and be identified here in the crowd? We haven't had a meeting, large or small, in the last 7 years without them being in the room, recording what we're saying and passing it on to their bosses. So if you wouldn't mind, would you like to stand up? I'm sure you're here. No, huh? Well, you're here. We know you're here because you haven't missed one meeting, and I will point this irony out. You're here because this is a public meeting. It's open to all people. Every time you meet with the city, it's behind closed doors in secret and in camera. Yeah. We are shut up. So to you and our bosses, I say, bring it into the light of day. Let the people see what it is that you want. Back to MAP-C. So 1971, the area is studied. They even look at natural corridors. How can we link things across the landscape? I don't think the science was as sophisticated as it is today with all of our GIS and computer technology, but they more or less got it right. And in fact, they described a potential green belt. And that's something we're working on now to get. And this is 71. How much land, how many important places do you think we've lost in those decades? Let's fast forward to about 15 years ago. The Nova Scotia Public Lands Coalition, a group of over 50 groups from across the province, many of them here in Metro, and some of them, you can see their logos, formed. And we advocated to protect more land in this province. The public is with us. The polling consistently shows roughly 70% of the population believes we should set aside and protect more natural land. And so we began the Endangered Hotspots campaign. We chose 18 areas across the province that we felt were exceptional and that they needed to be protected. In Metro, there were several, and one of them is Blue Mountain, Birch Cove Lakes. Now, around that time, Environmental Design and Management Limited, a consulting firm, did a study. It's a very large study. I have it here. It's full of maps and information. This study was done in advance of the Halifax Regional Plan of 2006. So this was actually delivered in March 2006 in advance of the plan and was meant to inform the plan. It's really important. If you look at the many maps on board, you will see a map that describes the boundary. And that boundary, particularly around the lakes and on the right-hand side where the developers want to put their sprawl development, that's the natural ridge line. That's why it is that boundary. And this was studied to death. In fact, this won a gold award, a national gold award for parks planning here in Canada that year. So it informed the regional plan of 2006, which committed to actually half a dozen regional parks. You see them there loosely identified with red dots. Most of them never got any more identified, and here we are 10 years later, they're still just red dots, just kind of like somewhere over there we'll make a park someday, maybe. And then, in the last 10 years, they've done nothing to actually make that happen. Only one of them, Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes, was actually identified with a map. That map was included in this regional plan, and there it is. And you see the boundary from the study repeated again. That's the natural ridge line. That's our boundary for our park. That is what people believe, and they are correct to believe, were promised to us. In fact, it says in the regional plan that it is the intention over time that the necessary private lands within the park to be acquired for public use. They go on to articulate a few different types of ways they could get it: land swaps, trades, purchases, obviously money, and so on and so forth. And then it would eventually be designated open space, natural resource, and zoned regional park. So the intention is crystal clear. When I hear councillors like Red Dragon on the radio saying, well, we didn't really say that, we didn't really promise. No, actually, you did. And it's in black and white. And much the same as the Otter Lake landfill, which you have a very strong feeling about. A promise made is a promise that needs to be kept. So we move forward a year, and in actually a little bit more than a year, so we got Wednesday, October 31st, so this would have been Halloween, 2007, the provincial government designates a massive piece of Crown land right in the area for protection. It's something like 1,300 hectares of very valuable land that could be put to other uses or sold, but it wasn't. It was protected. They contributed that land to the city's stated objective of having a park, and it was big, big news at the time. Here's a press release from that day, and it says, in part, I want to see that quote, "I'm very pleased with the province's collaborative approach and support for HRM's regional plan," said Mayor Peter Kelly. "This will help us move forward with HRM's plans for a regional park in the area." So any suggestion made by councillors or developers that the wilderness area is the park is bogus. This was a contribution, and a very valuable one, from the province to the city for its plans, but the understanding was always that it would acquire the lands as it said it would. So here's a ceremony that was held, kind of a joyful occasion. You see the Minister of Natural Resources, Mark Perrin, holding a picture from Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes that was presented to him. You see Len Goucher and Marianne McGraw and Debbie Hum, some politicians on the provincial and on the municipal front. Barry Barnett, there's a couple others, Chris Miller's there, slightly thinner Ray Lord is there. It's a long time ago, folks. And here's some comments from Mark Parent at that time. He said, "The new Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes wilderness area will complement HRM's future regional park identified in the HRM plan." So you have the mayor, the minister, everybody understands what the deal is here. There's two parts to this deal. So that's the big area that was designated wilderness area, that in yellow. That proposed highway, don't worry about that, it doesn't exist, and we will make sure it never does. The green on the other side is Crown land, but they didn't designate that right away, and just up in the upper left-hand corner was the Cox Lake Reserve Crown land. And we'll come back to that because later on they add that too. And so it was a very big time. People were very impressed, it was all very good. Oops, what's that? Expanding our green belt, activists applaud new protected areas, things are going swimmingly, but then progress comes to a screeching halt when from the developers, not even a year since the regional plan passed, and this is really important, their lands, like a lot of greenfield lands, are in what's called urban reserve designation. It means that it is not to be considered for development in the life of the 25-year plan. So that means 2031, I believe, right? 2031? Before it's even possible to consider it. And even then, another plan will come out and it may not be required then, because we learned in the regional planning process through the study that Stantec did that we have more than enough developable land in the more economical service areas, and we don't need to continue to sprawl. I'm sorry, Tristan, we're going to be on the spot. The statistic about our city's fiscal growth versus population growth, what was it again?
We nearly doubled in size, but we've only grown population by 1/5 in a 22-year period. Hey folks, Tristan Cleveland with RHL Lines. So we studied the growth of the city and found that from 1992 to 2014, we physically grew in size by 92%, so nearly doubled in size, but only grew in population by 1/5. So if you think about it, all of us are paying for that many more roads, that much more distance for garbage pickup, for water pipes, all of that. We have more growth, but less money to buy the things that we need, and more infrastructure to pay for with our taxes. It's crazy.
Thank you, Tristan. So, a year after the regional plan is passed and the lands are zoned urban reserve, no need to consider them for development, forget about anything to do with the park. We just simply don't need it, and we're not going to allow development back there. And this is one of many urban reserve areas. They come forward with this proposal. They say, well, yeah, we don't care what the plan says. We want our development. We'd like you to approve it. Because, you know, it happens all the time. HRM Council all the time says, yeah, well, we have rules, but we'll give them a pass on those rules. So what is the point of having plans and rules and having people show up and go through endless processes when they're then discarded and dismissed and just overruled? So this was pretty bold, I would say. Oh, we want their sprawling development all around the lakes. Remember that map. So at that time, Halifax Regional Council moved three things: to undertake a watershed study, to begin negotiations for the boundary of the Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes through a facilitated process with an independent facilitator, and to further review, and essentially what this means is the request for secondary planning. That's what the developers want. It essentially doesn't sound very threatening, but it is a major step forward in the development process. Once they have that, the value of the land goes way up, on paper at least, and really it's almost an unstoppable thing at that point. So they're asking for that again, I think for the third time. So we got our watershed study. These types of scientific studies, it's funny, you know, it's in the eye of the beholder. We think that what that study said is if there's any development west of the 102, that it will significantly impact the lakes. Look at the ones in yellow in particular. You see lakes going from eutrophic to mesotrophic to potentially eutrophic. And the downstream effects on potential effects on Kearney Lake and Paper Mill Lake. So we look at that study and say, well, this study clearly shows that there should be no development west of the 102. Developers, on the other hand, look at the piece of the study that said something about technology could probably handle wastewater disposal, and they point to that and say, see, so the study clearly says there should be development. So it's really in the eye of the beholder.
Just give an explanation of the terminology, please. Eutrophic, eutrophic.
I think, I don't know, David, do you want to handle that as a biologist? Can you answer that better than I? There's a microphone beside you, Dave. Eutrophic.
Eutrophic is bad. And lagertrophic is, in our landscape anyways, it's the best quality.
It means it's getting worse.
Okay.
Just
And the scale is? From from top to bottom, good to bad.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't really see the
I believe it's olotrophic, followed by mesotrophic, followed by eutrophic in descending order of degradation.
So the current status is a lagertrophic.
Richard, you're a scientist. You should know this.
I'm an
You should
actual
explain it.
physicist.
Thanks. Okay, so we're gonna keep going. And the cost for sprawl is costing more and more. So they got an election and they got some really progressive people in their council, and the mayor explained, and we zoned the perimeter as no development. Now, the developers went berserk. They threatened lawsuits. They were just livid because they're used to getting their way. And he said, yeah, we had a couple of years that was really ugly. But after that, the developers settled down. They're business people after all, recognized that the new rules still provided plenty of opportunity for building and profit. And they began to develop in the serviced areas where they should and gave up on the greenfield development. And what the mayor related is that in the next few years, their prices, their taxes started to come down and they were able to afford services. Win, win, win. The developers didn't like it at first, but they won. I wouldn't about that. I think most of us would agree that the developers should be fairly compensated for their land, but only at the value of raw and developed land. They shouldn't be allowed to essentially extort a massive fortune based on build-outs that will never happen. It is perfectly logical and perfectly reasonable to be given the many millions of dollars that the land would cost, to take that money, go and buy land that's available in the serviced area and do development and make your profits there. There's nothing wrong with making profit, but it isn't going to happen here. So you've got to get used to that. Up here, it's obvious. A list of cities around the world, and it's just a short list of cities with green belts. We deserve to have a green belt too. So just last year, the current Liberal government actually added more land to this regional park, this Blue Mountain Park, and the Parks and Protected Areas Plan. And big kudos to the current government. They designated 100 and some odd areas, small and large, as either new wilderness areas, new smaller nature reserves, or additions to those things, as well as a few additions to provincial parks. So that was a major step forward in our province's commitments with regards to protected areas, province-wide, and that included adding the 2 light orange colored pieces that have previously not been part of this land assembly. So now, what you're looking at essentially is about 70% of the land necessary for the park. The back country, the area that's meant to be wild and largely without hard facilities, that you wouldn't have washrooms, you wouldn't have ice cream stands, you wouldn't have picnic parks. Those would be the stuff that would happen in the front country around the land that the developers own, but that the city has committed to acquire if we just actually live up to that commitment. That was the concept of this park, which I maintain, and I think most of us would agree, would be the equivalent of our Central Park. In fact, I think it'd be better than Central Park in New York, and it certainly would probably be the biggest and most impressive urban park in Canada, if not North America. Again with the developers. The facilitator's report comes out the other week. It showed up on the website, deep inside the HRM website, no notice, no press release. Most of you have been to meetings, I would think, the Dakin Drive meeting maybe, other previous public meetings. We've all signed sheets, they have our emails, they could have told us. They didn't. It just showed up online quietly in the middle of the 2 busiest weeks of June. Again, we don't care that we're in urban reserve, we want our development. And oh, by the way, we've somehow convinced the facilitator that this is how you get your park, which she estimated based on their quote of $30 million to provide access alone. And then should get back to the job of designating the lands, purchasing or acquiring whatever method that is necessary. not clear, the terms of reference for the facilitator was to negotiate an agreement between the city and the developers over acquiring the necessary lands for the park. She didn't do that. Now, maybe they didn't agree, but, and it's clear that they didn't. I mean, if you read the barely 5-page report, they are miles apart. What's funny is she never actually came right out and said the obvious conclusion that they did not reach agreement, and that should have been done. Instead, she seems to have slipped into arbitration and sort of picked one side and said, I disagree with the park staff, I agree with the developers, and that's beyond commanding.
Lovely wife and myself back to see the area, and we lived not far from it, and we were absolutely blown away. And people like Wendy and Bob McDonald, Truman Layton, who you're going to hear from later tonight, who encouraged me to take the canoe loop around. It blows your mind. You will not believe it, how fantastic it is. On a fall day, nothing could be more spectacular. As I said, I don't want to talk too long, but this issue, I promise, is very important. I particularly want to thank Raymond, Lord, and Tristan, who, with their passion, have really just fired me up so much that I'm ready to march down or tie myself to a tree, or honestly, I used to be just an average citizen.
And next time, everyone. Tristan Cleveland with our knowledge economy. What we need in Halifax is people developing software, people working on convince Cole to move to your city. But we do. We need to convince, when companies are considering moving to Halifax, the question that they ask themselves is, can I convince a talented young person to move from anywhere in the world to come work for my company and stay and live in this city? That is our survival. We have to do it. So now I'm not just making this up. In the last few years, 500 companies moved from one location to another.
Northwest Trails Association, and I just thought I'd give you a little bit of information about how we got involved in it. In the love of the Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes area. We started, after an introduction to the area in 2004, we started leading interpretive hikes into Susie's, Charlie's, Fox, Ash Lakes, and Blue Mountain Hill, and with a definite focus on natural history. We've taken in school classes, youth groups, university outdoor club from Dell, and a variety of naturalists. Just to give them a glimpse of what a true wilderness really is. The lakes are still very pristine. So we were really delighted as an association in 2006 when the municipality, in the regional municipal planning strategy, proposed the formation or the creation of a very significant regional park. And you've seen a raised map of Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes Regional Park. Further, in 2009, the province then stepped up to the plate and designated all the provincial crown land within the regional park to be a wilderness area. And in fact, their designation of land went far beyond the original boundaries shown in map 13 in 2006. So we were even more delighted. Things just got better. In 2012, HRM vision was reiterated at a huge public meeting on Nathan Drive in the Facilitators Anglican Church. And it included all the land that was originally proposed to be the regional park and all the wilderness area as well. So, not in our wildest dream or most horrific nightmare did we imagine this facilitators report that we're reacting to today. We have to insist that HRM keep its promise to the regional park to acquire the land within the regional park from the private landowners. The really sad thing is that to this date, 10 years later, HRM has failed totally to acquire 1 square centimeter of land in that area. Shame. What is this report anyway? The facilitator, I think Ray has summarized what the facilitator's mandate was, what she was supposed to do. She had to come forward with a boundary for the regional park, and this was going to be a consensus between or amongst the people sitting around at the table representing the landowners and representing the regional staff. What happened? What we got looked remarkably like a development proposal. Totally unrealistic. This was not her mandate. And in fact, in the report, it indicates very clearly that this report or the proposal does not have the support of HRM staff, for which I'm very thankful. And for this reason, I think the report has to be rejected, and any request for secondary planning moving forward has to be declined.
More damn trees, we're surrounded by trees. But look at that park now, surrounded by the city of Halifax, and just a much-loved park. And if you drive out to High and you look over at Carney Lake, there's condos springing up like mushrooms overnight. We need that park, and it's entirely appropriate for the density of the city today, and especially the density of the city for when our children and our grandchildren are living here. And it'll be mentioned later, but we need this park for our fellow critters, the animals and the wildlife. We need the park for fresh water, and we need the park for the air we breathe. So if Rudy were here, he would say, don't give up. As long as there's not a bulldozer on that site, we can win this battle. Thank you.
I'm David Patrick. I'm with the Halifax Field Naturalist. We have a website at HalifaxTrails.ca, and I've been trying to recently put about 6 or 7 posts trying to keep track of all the developments around this whole issue. And I'm going to try to put the audio there, if it turns out all right tonight. So it's a place you might go to for reference if you're writing your letters. It's a plug for the Halifax Field Naturalist. Well, as the field naturalists, we're concerned with species and their habitats. That's what we spend our time studying. I'll just try to provide a few highlights about the Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes area. First of all, it's important as habitat for 6 or 7 species at risk, including 3 birds, 2 or 3 plants, and 1 mammal, which is the mainland moose. So just on that point alone, it's a very significant area. Secondly, as Karen Beasley is going to talk about, the protected area that we've been given is very much threatened by the possibility of a development. She's going to talk about that, so we could lose that totally. Thirdly, I want to change hats a little bit. I'm kind of a Shabako Peninsula man. And I've actually worked with several organizations on the Shabako Peninsula. And today the Shabako Peninsula is a very significant conservation area. We have 29% of the area in protected areas. We have another 12% as Crown land. Now, the Birch Mountain, Blue Mountain, Birch Cove Lakes is really the jewel in the crown. And that crown is right at the top of the Shabako Peninsula. And it's extremely important as a corridor area out of the peninsula, which has already been identified by the O2 design and some of their preliminary sketches that we need corridors. So that's a very significant factor. And then finally, us. You know, having lots already, as we've been talking about. I've been involved with the organization that runs the Bluff Trail for the past 8 years. And I can tell you that in the last year, the use of that trail has skyrocketed. I would say by tenfold. Where you used to go out and maybe see 2 or 3 or 5 people, I can see as many as 100 at the same time out there now. And that's actually beginning to damage both the trail and the habitat around it. And these are young people who want to get out, who want them to get out. But the point is, you know, this Tristan talked about,
on to move forward with some visionary planning with regard to recreation, and taking families into the environment is one of the pillars of their activities. So please remind, when you're writing your notes in, that this is part of the obligation that Rec Halifax has said they're going to do. A lot of young teachers have come up through the recent system perhaps and not had the opportunity to get out into green space. When I was working in a school in Spryfield, many of the teachers were afraid to take the kids outdoors because they just weren't comfortable. I'm an amateur naturalist, learning every time I go out for a hike, and that's the way we've done our walks, trying to interpret as we go so that we stop and show people the Mayflowers or other special things. Bob didn't mention biodiversity. I think Dave will mention that. But the Blue Mountain area had the BioBlitz from SMU. We had 800 and some odd species identified in that area. Many new to the location. And I'll just finally say, build on what Tristan said about economy. Every summer we have massive numbers of tourists coming in through the harbor. We've been approached to take people on hikes, show me the birds in the area. We want to go on your trails. So there's a missed opportunity because we just haven't, we're not ready for them. They want that wilderness experience, and there's another chance for entrepreneurial endeavors that this park could share with the world.
a new book called Outdoor Adventures Halifax, Exciting and Little-Known Adventures Less than 30 minutes away. And the very first item that's treated is the Birch Cove Lakes. And it's extremely
So thank you guys for all your help in organizing tonight. There's been a number of references, so I'd like to get right to Professor Karen Baisley from Dalhousie University School for Environment and Resource Studies. Karen Baisley, folks.
Hi, I'm a professor, so I'm going to stand back here. Many of the things that I wanted to say have been said by other people. I'm not going to repeat that, but I wanted to show you my figures I have made, and my apologies for the quality of them, or I might say fuzziness. I was just looking through the facilitator's report when I first came upon it, and I saw this map, and I'd been reading points that were made in the report. And when it became clear to me that the report was suggesting, oh, well, the wilderness area will function as a regional park, that's fine, we don't need anything else, let's go ahead and go forward with the suburban development. I thought to myself, no way, that is not gonna work, that's not the way it's designed to work. I've been studying best practices, scientific principles for designing protected areas and drawing protected areas boundaries. And it's clear to everybody that if you have a protected area, you have to buffer that area from the surrounding activities. And that area buffer, it's not 100 meters. 100 meters is a ditch. It's not 300 meters. That's a politically acceptable figure that the developers might not push back about. The scientifically defensible buffer minimum is 1,000 meters. So, but I accepted both the 300-meter boundary and the 1,000-meter boundary, and I thought, okay, let me take these maps that are right here in the appendices of the facilitator's report, and I grabbed my highlighter marker, and I grabbed my scale ruler, and I did some drawing. So what we have here, I should have practiced with the pointer. But what we have here, who has that? Okay, so we have here the map of the regional plan that we've seen before, the regional park, and the bigger gray area. Let's see if I can mark this. So this bigger gray outline out here, that's the regional park boundary that we've seen for more than a decade in all these various plans and promises. If we take that as the given and we draw in a 300-meter buffer from that edge, we have this red line here. So we have all this area of hatched and solid green in the middle that we could consider relatively protected if we have this big area and a 300-meter buffer. If we take that buffer into 1,000 meters, we have the inside red line. We still have a pretty good protected area in this solid green stuff. A core protected area, well buffered from the surrounding development by this buffer zone. That's a good plan. That's why that plan was drawn like that. That's why that regional park boundary looks like that, because there are people who knew what they were doing, drew it. Okay, so let's take a look now at a different alternative. Let's say all we have now is the protected wilderness area that the province went ahead in good faith and contributed to this collaborative park. So that's, there's a gray hatched area that is the protected wilderness area. So if you take the outline of the provincial wilderness area, it goes kind of like this, all like that. And if we do the same thing, we take our 300-meter buffer and we have this skinny looking little hatched area that's left. Well, okay, it's not too bad in the middle. If we take our 1,000-meter buffer, all we have is this. That is about a ½ kilometer wide at its widest spot. So we have about 0.75 square kilometers, that's less than 1 square kilometer, of core protected wilderness area remaining. That is insufficient for a protected wilderness area. that would be in contravention of the objectives, the mandates, the standards under the Wilderness Act. There's a huge risk here that if the recommendations of the facilitator are accepted, we will have a protected wilderness area that is not really protected and that will not be able to be managed according to the act under which it was designated. And there's very real risk that it would have to be delisted. Then where would we be? So then I thought, okay, well, the developer did allow for a little bit of protected, I don't know, parkland, edge, something. So that heavier black line there shows a little bit of extra. Just a little here, a little there. If we take the buffers from those and move our ways in 300 meters, or 1 kilometer, we end up with virtually the same interior core. It adds next to nothing. It's not helping. So that's all I wanted to do, show you those maps, say the original boundaries for the regional park work. They're sound, principled science. We would have a good, solid core area that would serve to protect wildlife and that would give a good backcountry wilderness kind of experience to the people who are paying their taxes and enjoying that area. If we accept the facilitator's report, we will not have either of those things. All right, so I'll leave it at that. To add one further thing, one gentleman said that he would be out there on the, on the line in front of the bulldozers chained to the trees or whatever, and I would say the same thing. I mean, I feel very strongly about this. Enough is enough. I will become arrested, go to jail, lay down.
Passion. That's what we need more of in our leaders. Don't see a lot of those. I'm kind of curious, how many of you feel like Karen does? Would you be willing to chain yourself to a tree? I know I would. Stand in front of a bulldozer? I think I would. Enough is enough. Who decides? The fundamental question in this mess, and it's not the only mess like it, is who decides where and how the city grows? So far, it's been developers. Buying cheap land and developing where it's most profitable and sprawling outwards and leaving us with the mess behind to pay for. How about, for a change, the elected officials, in cooperation with the citizens, through all these planning things that we spend so much time attending and participating in, actually end up being the rules? How about municipal representatives that care more about what the people of the city have to say and want than the powerful money developers they seem to feel that they're considering? How about democracy? At this point, we're probably behind schedule, but we did want to open up the really burning comments, and so on. I know there's one gentleman who would like to in particular relate his experience from Blue Mountain Birch Cove.
And also Brian Whale is here.
Okay, and we do have some other politicians. I see Young Strike is here, and I think there may be some others. So you're welcome to. I see Richard Zareski's on the mic already. Richard, if we can hold just for a moment, we do want to have, and I'm sorry. Sure, we're good. I'd like Truman to go first, because I think his experience is something that we should all hear from. So just come on the mic.
Excuse me, I feel somewhat lost with all the experts telling you all about technical things about this area. I'm here as a user of Birch Cove Place, and very briefly I'll tell you how this came about. Okay. My experience started many years ago when I moved to the top of Bridgeview, where I crossed my neighbor's property and follow a trail across the high to Susie Lake. It was a 20-minute walk. I had a young son, and we used to do this rather regularly until I couldn't resist buying a canoe, and we started canoeing over the lakes. We didn't have a map, so we traced our way around all of the lakes until we found the perfect spot, and it's still a perfect spot. One incident of canoe, I had a friend who lives in the Annapolis Valley, and I took him in once, and he was lost, couldn't resist. He bought a canoe, he locked it to a tree on one of the islands in the lake, and he drives from the valley to Halifax, goes to the lake with his canoe, and one night, a couple of years ago, we said, I wonder how many times we've spent a night at this particular site. And we figured that it would be about 47 nights over 47 years that we just a couple of things that are interesting about Susie Lake that many people probably wouldn't think of. There are almost no mosquitoes and black flies in the Susie Lake area. If you're used to camping and canoeing and whatnot in Nova Scotia, you would realize that that's really quite unique. I assume it's because there aren't many birds for the black flies to breed in, and the mosquitoes would not find many swamps. It's a really unique area for canoeing, swimming, enjoying nature. I've taken a lot of people to the lakes through the years, walking or canoeing, and the reaction is, particularly if they're from away, is you can't have an area like this close to the city. It just is impossible. And I agree, and I've enjoyed it for 4 years, and I'd like to admit. If canoeing and swimming and overnight camping is not your thing, there's also excellent sunbathing, with or without clothing. And in the winter, you can skate for miles. For reasons I don't understand, those bikes almost always freeze beautifully smooth. If they're covered with snow, of course you can join the cross-country skiers. I like the unsupervised atmosphere of this wilderness area. But the pressure from developers who also recognize the advantages of this area are forcing us to ensure by legal means that it remains open to those of us who feel the need to escape from the busy world. I've been fortunate to have hiked often in both Scotland and New Zealand, and a few times in the Canadian Rockies. And there's no doubt in my mind that Susie Lake beats them all. That I think is another reason that we have to do all that we can to protect them. I feel it would be criminal to see it develop for more shopping or more homes or condos. And I think we owe it, people my age particularly, owe it to the next generation of Haligonians to maintain this area for what it is.
My name is Diana Whalen, and I really appreciate so many people being out tonight to really fight for and speak up for the Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes. It's been said, the history's been said very well. For myself, my involvement really began in 2003 when I was running in the provincial election and met a constituent who was also in Birchview, the same as you are, Truman, or were, and he said that the only thing he cared about was the Blue Mountain Birch Cove Lakes, and I had to say I'd never been there. So after the election, he took me up, we went up to see Susie's in Quarry Lake, and from that point onward, I became one of the proponents for a protected area. And we began, and quite a number of us here on the stage, James, you've been out with us, but Bob and Wendy and Ray, Chris Miller from the Canadian Parks and Wilderness, and others got together to talk about how we could make this happen. And at the legislature, I brought in a private member's bill asking the government to make it part of the protected wilderness area. We did that in 2005. We participated in the regional plan. And when the consultations were done, don't forget that this plan came about after a lot of public meetings, and many of you may have attended them. They were held all over the city, and we attended them, and we raised the issue of this regional park. And we were so excited when it found its way into the actual final plan, and we felt we'd really accomplished something there. And what it did for me as a provincial representative was gave us the proof that this area is special and that the province should turn its attention to supporting it. And so we really feel the province then in 2007 looked at it, 2009 they designated about 3,500 acres at the time, and that was our commitment to the city's plan. So we felt that we stepped up to support the regional plan, and I'm very proud of the province doing that, and subsequently we've added more land to it. But we need the city to do the part of the plan that they had promised, that they committed to. Because in talking to our Department of Environment and to the Minister of Environment, their understanding was clear that the regional park that the city was to prepare and to put together is the area where you'd have the higher use, and it's been said here, but worth reiterating, that's where we have the public use, the trails and the boat launches and the picnic areas, and we protect the inner country for wilderness and wildlife habitat, and that's what the protected wilderness area is supposed to be for. And I must say, I think that the facilitator's report got it completely wrong in identifying a wilderness area as a park area, because it isn't, and the Minister of Environment's made that clear to me as well. We see it as being very much habitat. We see it as good for the environment, good for health and wellness for all of us to have wilderness and wild spaces. And so I'm very, upset to see that there could be development on this land. If we went back to the map that was shown with the cross-hatching, you'd see that in the dark area that was designated as a regional park, a lot of it has been protected by the province. We stepped up as a province on your behalf, because that commitment is for all of us. We did that because we wanted to see that area all protected, and we know it takes working together to find a way to acquire the lands. I did want to let you know, we've talked to Margaret Miller, the Minister of Environment. She sees it the same way, and she will be writing her comments in as Minister of Environment. I'll write in as MLA for Clayton Park West, and so as I said, and I was very happy to have her support. I know support of our caucus members, and I think we may hear from my colleague Joachim Stroink as well, who's very much an outdoors and wilderness person as well. I wanted to mention that part about the commitment, and I want to urge you. I know there's been mention about writing, but I would like to urge you on the call to action, because I am a politician, and I've been a provincial and municipal councillor as well before that. I know that it matters when people write, and the councillors can sit back now and wait and see how many people call them, how many people write them or email them, and I can tell you as an elected official, that means a lot to us. It gets registered, and it does affect how political representatives will vote. And I know myself that standing here today and telling you I support this regional park and I believe it should be left natural, I am speaking on behalf of the people in my riding, because over these years that I've represented Clayton Park West, people have told me time and again how they want that land left natural. We have a high density area where I live, as you know. There are a lot of people in the apartments and condominiums of Clayton Park West and Albury, UTEC area, the expansion of Carney Lake around that area as well, lots of new apartments going in. And this is a natural land that we can all enjoy for many, well,
Do what the audience don't say your name, actually say